Welcome to another episode of my podcast. It's fun with me. Today we're going to be talking about Dracula. We're going to be talking about vampires. We're going to talk about Halloween in general. I devoted the entire episode last year, for the origins of Halloween. Where did it start? How did we get here? Why do people want to celebrate such horrible? No, I'm going to rephrase it. Why did people start celebrating something that related to evil spirits? And yeah, I devoted the entire episode. So if you're interested, you can check this out. It's on my channel in my podcast section, but I'm probably going to list the link down in the description box. And we're going to get started this Fun With Me podcast. Today, I want to talk about vampires. And I was like, okay, if we turn this into series, and every year I'm going to talk about some spooky themes, the first thing that I want to get started is vampires, which is pretty obvious because people were fascinated with these creatures for as long as anyone can remember. It started in ancient history from ancient people. It wasn't exactly vampires. It wasn't exactly like human form, but it was more like creatures of the night and creatures that had something in common. They were sucking your blood and they were doing this fight. Some of the creatures, they needed this for survival. Some of these creatures just enjoyed that. Some of them were evil spirits. Most of them were evil spirits, by the way. But it didn't turn to, I guess, human form. And only in the 18th century, we started seeing a lot of literature devoted to vampires. Specifically, Dracula was very, very popular. There were so many more novels or I guess horror books out there, but Dracula is still one of the most popular, and we still have a lot of different interpretations of Dracula itself. Who was Vlad? Who was this guy? Okay, and I'm gonna give you some of my favorite films to watch about vampires. I'm actually watching right now Let Me In, if everyone's taking 2010, and very popular actress is playing there, but I don't remember her name. You don't really have to ask me any name of an actor because most of the time I won't remember. Okay, we're gonna get started with I guess some creatures in myth and in history. And in Mesopotamia, we had Lamushtu. I'm gonna read some of these names because I don't really know how to pronounce them. I don't really know these names, and I'm not really sure that I'm going to memorize them because it's irrelevant. So Mamushtu had a head of a lion, and they had a body of a donkey. Yeah, a donkey. So a lion was sucking blood, and the body of a donkey was pretty relevant, I guess, for something to be afraid of. Okay, I guess they didn't think of a donkey as a threatening animal, so they just put a lion head on top of it, and they were like, yeah, that'll do. That'll do. Okay, so then we're going to ancient Greek, and not Greek, I guess Greece. So we're going to ancient Greece, and it's streaks. Streaks are very popular in modern history, and in a lot of actually literature, we can find them. And you can probably have some similarities with Strigoi from the Vampire Academy, and I really love the film, up until the point when I rewatched it and said like, oh, that's boring. It's actually really boring. We need more action. More action. And if they added a little bit more to it, then it would have been so much better. I didn't really like the series where like CV or CW, they kind of like wanted to get a little bit different twist. If I'm not mistaken, the director of the series was Julian Blake, who filmed The Vampire Diaries. Like Vampire Diaries bomb. Still think that this is probably one of the best series that I watched, and I was very invested. But Vampire Academy, it was too messy. It was all over the place. I didn't really like it, so I will not advise the series to watch. And yeah, so we're kind of like moving, those were birds that were kind of like sucking your blood. And now we're moving to Philippines. They had manananggal. Manananggal. Okay, I'm pretty fluent with this right now. And they could actually separate their body and like in the torso area, and they would fly and again suck your blood. Pretty much obvious outcome for all of these creatures. Then in Malaysia, we had penanggalan. Penanggalan was a flying head with a tail, and again, sucking blood. So much more. In Australia, Yaramayahu. Yaramayahu. Still fluent, I guess. And I pretty much nailed this name finally. But again, there were so many more because every single culture wanted to create something unique and very cool. So they were like going with their own names. And if I'm mistaken, Australia, they had something interesting. It was some sort of creature with a huge mouth, and the paws or feet and hands, they had some sucking thing, and they were like sucking blood with their paws. I don't know what was the reason for the mouth, but probably was useful for some other purposes. I don't know which purposes this was, if he was sucking with his paws. And we're finally getting there. We're getting closer, guys. In the 18th century, Romania and Eastern Europe in general was suffering. It was suffering from plague. It was suffering from everything. It's just in general, they were suffering. And we had, as humanity, a lot of issues and problems. Plague. I actually did a podcast I guess about a year ago, where it was talking about, again, plague. Where did it start? What was the reasons whatsoever? And during this period of time, people, they were super religious because they believed in their saints and they thought they're gonna die just because God wasn't pleasant with them and trying to teach them some sort of lesson. And church was thriving back in the day because, just like they thought they can manipulate people into thinking that it came all from demons. The only problem that later, because plague was for a long period of time, people started realizing that, you know what, we're pretty religious, we're still dying. And even people of church, they're still dying. So there must be some other reason. There must be some other reason. On witches and plague, bacteria, whatever, because people just didn't really know about that. And they were like, okay, so where do we find answers to these questions? Let's go and dig out some pits and graves. So they went to this cemetery. I don't even know if they had any cemeteries during plague. It was pretty messy and people were literally dying every single day. I don't really think they had any coffins. It was too fancy. It was too fancy. That is the main reason why they would just like get everyone in one pit, then get some soil on top, and they were good to go. To find these answers, they undug those graves and they were looking in some, signs. What is happening? What is going on? Probably you're going to tell me the answer. You're dead. So tell me, what is the reason why you're dead? And they found these answers because they were like, oh my God, I remember this person. He or she didn't have these long hair. And oh, look at these nails. Gorgeous, but they're so much longer than they used to be. I don't even know how people recognize these kind of things, because when people died, and especially if it was from plague, they weren't in good condition. They looked bad. I mean, they looked really bad. So I guess someone was very into details. And then they had some bloatings and they had blood around their mouth. And that was mainly the reason why they thought these were vampires. So what really happened? Let's get into some signs. Then when the body is decomposing and the dehydration starts, skin kind of like shrinking. And that is the main reason why apparently some hair and nails, they might look longer. As well as bloating is pretty kind of like obvious reason, because a lot of bacteria, they're forming in a valley, and that is the main reason why it's bloating, because of some gas and decomposing. And it starts pushing the blood to the mouth, and that is the main reason why it looks like people were feeding and they were eating some blood. And that immediately brought another question, like, okay, so if they have a lot of blood around their mouth and they actually have longer nails, then probably they're alive, but they're dead at the same time. And the stereotypes about vampires were born, that they're like living dead, they live in their coffins, they sleep during the day, and they are awake during the night. And then they go around the village and eat other people or turn them into vampires. They didn't have, I believe they couldn't find any marks around some neck. I don't really think that was the case here. I think it was just fear. Basically, that was fear. And I totally get them, guys. If you don't really have any scientific explanation, honestly, I'm not into science, but I would believe anything that people around me would say. Like there are vampires going around, and I'm like, oh, really? Do you have any proof? Yeah, we have proof. We found some bodies and the nails are growing. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to believe you. And okay, so we're there. We know that vampires are real. Like, we're in the 18th century. Try to imagine this in your head. Like, we know that they're there. How do we fight them? How do we kill someone who's already dead? And people, they came up with brilliant ideas. Like, let's behead them, cut their heads, and then let's set them on fire to the ashes. Great, I guess, example of killing a dead person. And then let's probably get a stake in their heart. And yeah, the best way is to probably use 3 of those options, and you know that it's not going to survive for sure. And people started believing this, and that is the main reason why a lot of novels, a lot of horror books, they reappeared, because people were like, oh, let's write about that. Let's create some story. Let's get this legend and let's give them some body. And the first, I guess, books that reappeared among people were very popular. And let me tell you which books were they. Of course, Dracula was one of the most popular back in the day, but there were a lot of others. Let me find them. Pretty obvious, The Vampire, but The Vampire was written with not with an I, but with a Y. And then Carmilla. But Dracula still is probably like one of the most popular out there. And well, my favorite, I guess, interpretation of 2014, like 2014, if I'm mistaken. And that was pretty accurate, I'd say. The Vlad, who was called like Vlad, not Dracula, but like Dragon or something like this, he was afraid to lose his wife and his son to Turkish. That was the main reason why he went to this hill and he found a demon who turned him into Dracula or a vampire who had enormous power and could protect the entire land from Turkish. So I would say this is pretty much one of my favorite interpretations and it's pretty much accurate. But people try to fight demons and evil spirits for as long as you can remember, up until a point when it wasn't even about people in general, but it was about mystical creatures. And the best way they found is to make sure that they have a safe place or they can protect their houses and their homes. So when they came up, especially like Romanians, they came up with this brilliant idea that if we pray hard to Julius, that jealous or Julius, I guess he was Julius, jealous. This was a two-faced god. Then probably he's going to protect us in our door frames from evil spirits. And they came up with this brilliant idea that to make sure that this evil spirit, like you can check this evil spirit and you can make sure that he is an evil spirit, you have to make sure that he can come in without an invitation. And this way you can check this out. So if someone gets in your house and you did not invite verbally this person, you did not invite in your house, then this is probably just like a normal person. It can be a bad person, but still a normal person. But if someone cannot get in, then this is probably an evil spirit. A lot of other, nations and a lot of different people, they believed in different gods and in different types of protecting spells, and they try to bury some protecting spells. But the idea was pretty much general, that your house is protected by some spells or herbs or maybe like people praying and whatever. And when the Christianity was taking over Europe and was taking over the entire, I guess, land, I'm not talking about like entire Earth planet because there's still so many more religions. But when the Christianity was taking over Europe, basically, they thought that it's better to make sure that now we don't have iron, we have crucifix. We don't have some spells, we have prayers. Basically, the idea is the same, a little bit different interpretation of this idea that evil spirit cannot come in as well. And do you know that a lot of Slovenians, they had this horseshoe, I guess this horseshoe on top of their door frame, and it wasn't only just for some luck in this house, but to protect from evil spirit, especially because this horseshoe was made of metal, and metal was always kind of like an immediate emergency kit from evil spirit. And you know that if you have it, it's probably just going to help you guys. It's probably going to help you. If I'm mistaken, my mom and my family, they do have a horseshoe on top of their door frames in my family apartment, in my parents' apartment, basically. But okay, like, why not? It's really cool that we still believe in this. And okay, so let's talk a little bit deeper about my favorite films, what I think is very cool to discuss. I guess Twilight, they were huge, especially in 2008 or 2010, if I'm mistaken. The first film came out, and then Vampire Diaries as well. That was super, super popular among teenagers, basically. And most of all, girls. Girls were charmed with vampires. It wasn't that crazy like Dracula. Do you remember like 90s option where he was like an old man walking around his palace or whatever, and you're like, oh, he's ugly and I don't really want to date him. And he looks weird, like super weird. This is a little bit different generation where vampires were hot. They were like super pretty. Jens were hot. And I really loved Vampire Diaries. And it was basically watching them because of Lena and Demon's story. And I was watching them because Ian Somerhalder was really hot. And yeah, two of the reasons. But I don't really think this is the only way why vampires are still super popular. Because with Transylvania and Vlad Dracula, more things reappeared in the novel. I don't really know if we can call it a novel. I guess it's just some horror book. But this book contains some practical ways how to defeat a vampire. They were afraid of garlic, and sometimes I'm afraid of garlic, and people, when they eat a lot of garlic, I kind of get it. It's not only a pet peeve of a vampire. But again, I'm super like into the fact that they can reflect in the mirror. That is good. I mean, like, you can give a credit to an author, because a lot of myths, they were around mirrors itself, that when a person dies in a lot of cultures, and again, especially like in Russia, you actually cover the mirrors for 9 days, if I'm not mistaken, or at least like until, no, not for 9 days, but until the body is getting buried in the soil, and then you can take it off. Because I heard so many rumors, like if you open the mirror and if you look in the mirror, you can actually see the other world, like hell, I don't know what you can see. And people, they got mad when they saw their reflection in the mirror, because the spirit world is unleashed during this period of time, while the soul is walking among the living, or something like this, guys. I don't really know. And yeah, we can give him credit for it. It was really nice. Again, vampires were afraid of crucifix because he needed to insert this aspect of, like, you have to still be religious, and that religion can save you from the dead. And yeah, basically, then again, you can set it on fire, or just behead it, or stake in heart. Why is it so popular still? Like, why do we live in a world where they're romanticized? Like, all these vampires are romanticized. It's pretty obvious. They are immortal, and people, they're obsessed with immortality, and we can still find this cure to live longer and to live like thousands of years. Some people, they really need this, and they're afraid of death. And this is just kind of like they're laughing in the death face. Like, oh, I died, but I'm still kind of like a living creature, and I'm super powerful. I'm more powerful than when I was just a person. I'm invincible. As a vampire, I know that I'm young and I'm not going to get old. And the only way I can sustain all this power and beauty and immortality is to suck the blood. Because blood is always considered to be something like a liquid of life. Like, without blood, you can't live. But at the same time, you can't live without a heart, or you can't live without a head. So, just like, that's why I guess we have other creatures, such as werewolves that eat your liver or something like this. I haven't done my research about werewolves. I'm not into werewolves. They're gross. They're like most of the time gross. The process of like turning, that's harsh. That's harsh. Vampires are so much cooler. Okay, another cool thing when we're talking about vampires, that they can turn into some magical creatures, and especially in bats. I guess the main reason why bats are associated with vampires is because they're most of the time the creatures of the night. And most of the time, they are very cute. They're not super scary as werewolves. And I would say that when like something turns into a bat, it can fly. They have the fangs similar to vampires. And I guess it's really popular that they were around some era of cemetery. So that was the main reason why I guess bats had become, or have become, intertwined or linked to vampires itself. So that's just my idea of why it had become so popular in, I guess, 18th century, to associate them with bats. And they have super speed. Not always, but most of them do have super speed. That is kind of like included in their superpowers, like a pack of superpowers. I know that is probably the main reason why we love vampires. Because, like, who don't want to be, like, name me a person who don't want to be young forever, or at least during the period of time where you live in. So you kind of like, you look cool. You don't need any Botox. You just look naturally beautiful. But the only catch is that if you turned into a vampire when you're like 50, you have to live, I guess, with this face for as long as you can live. And another great thing, like, do they have any Botox in the future, like vampire Botox? Is it going to make a change on their, or it's going to dissolve because they have some superpower and they can heal themselves really quickly? I don't know, but it's really bad for them if they can heal super quick from Botox, because, like, what is the reason for them to stay in a 50-year-old body for the eternity? I don't know. It's really cool when you're 30, I guess, or maybe 25, 20. Yeah, kind of cool. That is it, guys. That is it for today's episode. I hope it was more or less entertaining, and that is my perspective why we still are in love with vampires. Not in a way. Like, if we think harder and we try to put ourselves in the position of victim, it's not really cool when someone is sucking your blood and someone is just like literally eating you alive. It's kind of scary. It's really scary. But I guess people are just into the power, like power and the way that you can control people, especially like in Vampire Diaries. It wasn't so much in Twilight, but in Vampire Diaries, they can, use the compulsion, and they can make people do whatever they wanted. And then the Vervain was protecting like you from the spells and vampires. That is actually really cool because they inserted this element of spells in ancient mythology and some ancient gods. That was very cool about Vampire Diaries. But in Twilight, we don't really get a lot of it. And most of the time they looked like they were made of stone, and they weren't like just real people. They had some weird bodies, and they were super pale. Most of the time they were super pale because they couldn't stand the sunlight, but they still could live under sunlight. And in the Vampire Diaries, you could wear a ring and enjoy the sun, or maybe even get tan. Why not? Okay, that's it for my podcast. It's fun with me. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this episode. I feel a little bit more relaxed talking about vampires. I don't know really why, but this is probably just like really one of my favorite time of the year, when you can do a very bright makeup, when you can put on some bright lipstick and just rock the world with horror stories, and you can eat a lot of pies. That is so cool. Yeah, that's it, guys, for today's podcast. And I'm saying this for the third time. I love you all so much, and I'm going to see you next time. Bye bye.